Hello, I'm in trouble. It's 12:30 at night. I made the erroneous, ridiculous, stupefying mistake to have a nap at 8 p.m. and then I woke up at 11 p.m. unable to get back to sleep, and now here I am. So if I sound a little bit husky, a little bit croaky, I'm not trying to seduce you. The reason I'm just trying to keep the noise down because my parents are asleep upstairs. The good news is that I leave for Japan in 2 days anyway, so if they're annoyed at me, I'm leaving. And also, it doesn't really matter how hecked up my body clock gets because I'm going 8 hours that way. Anyway, look over there. This is a video I've wanted to make since. Can you see that? Actually, I said look over there. You can't see that. Give me a second. Better. Right. This is a video I've wanted to make since coming back to Scotland. It's really only a video I can make in Scotland because some of these books are heavy, man. This is going to be the 9 weirdest books I own. Okay? I often notice that people talk about books like House of Leaves, or S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst, or Elemental P, or Gadsby. These kind of books that are metafictional or ergodic or in some way play with the idea of what a book can be. And I am fascinated by these books, and I don't really get a chance to talk about them on my channel for various reasons. So I'm home and I have a chance to pick up some of these physical books. All of them are mine except this one, which is my mother's. I gave it to her on her birthday. She hasn't read it. These are in no particular order. The reason these are at the top is they're a little bit more fragile. So let's start with them, shall we? This is The Unfortunates by B.S. Johnson. The Unfortunates is a book in a box. What do I mean by that? Well, if you open it up, you'll see the following. And let me read this to you. Ooh. This novel has 27 sections, temporarily held together by removable wrapper. I've since taken the wrapper off. Apart from the first and last sections, which are marked as such, the other 25 sections are intended to be read in random order. If readers prefer not to accept the random order in which they receive the novel, then they may rearrange the sections into any other random order before reading. The point of this book is that you can shuffle it like a deck of cards. Which sounds crazy, in my opinion, and I'm a big B.S. Johnson fan. He was this amazing man who lived in, I think, 1960s, 1970s England. He didn't live very long. He passed away at 42, but you'll notice that a lot of these books are also by B.S. Johnson. The story covers a sports journalist who goes to, I believe, Manchester to report on the match of the day, and it just follows him as he's doing his job. So one of these kind of leaflet pamphlet-y things might be about him having lunch, one might be him walking down an old street, a lot of them are him thinking about his ex-girlfriend. And I suppose the point of the endeavour is that by ordering the text in whichever way you prefer, or just at random, you will get a different sense of theme and priority in the books. If you read about him discussing his job first, maybe for your reading experience, this man is a professional and everything is about him making sure he gets his job done right. Maybe if you start with 3 sections about this ex-girlfriend, you'll view this as a man who just cannot get his past off his brain, his romantic past off his brain, and that makes his work suffer. It's a really interesting experiment. That's number 1. This is number 2, and the reason I also have these together is this is a book called Composition Number 1, and you'll notice it looks very similar to The Unfortunates. This is also a book in a box, and I have to be careful with this one, because what this is, rather than having, 25 loose leaf papers, you'll just see if I do that. This novel is made up of 150 single sheets of paper. It does what The Unfortunates does, but on cocaine. Hello, it's me from the future here. I thought I'd give you a proper glimpse into what these two books in boxes look like. So the first one in front of me here is The Unfortunates, and it should be said as well that with The Unfortunates, it wasn't originally published in a box that looked like a book. It looked almost like a chessboard, is my understanding. So you have, again, the introduction by Jonathan Coe, who is the premier, maybe the only B.S. Johnson scholar. The pamphlet that says first, and then you have all of these, which you can shuffle and read in any order until you get to last, and you have to finish with last. That's The Unfortunates, and you'll see with Composition Number 1, if I just do this, how clean is this table? It's fine. And I just kind of spread these out on the table like that. You can read these in absolutely any order, and on the back of each page is this gorgeous sort of digital, almost marbled design, which I love. So 2 very similar books in some sense, and in another sense, not similar at all. Interestingly enough, I believe composition number 1 was written before The Unfortunates. This one was written in 1962. You'll also maybe notice that this one, composition number 1, and this one are a bit more fancy. They were by a company called Visual Editions. Now, Visual Editions has since gone bankrupt, so it's quite difficult to find these texts. Mum, you're welcome. Read this book. So I guess just staying with composition number 1 for a minute, how does it differ from The Unfortunates? Well, the content is different. This one is set in France, I believe, in World War II, kind of Nazi-occupied France. Obviously, when you're shuffling every single page, the story is a lot more thin, a lot more flimsy. It's a little bit more difficult to kind of work out what's going on. I think this one is less of a story and more of a poem. You know, you have such a jumble of text and nothing gets hung on to very long. You kind of have to try and make sense of it as best you can. And maybe you can make the argument that there is no sense to be made in this book. It's just sort of like an experimental poem. I actually really enjoyed it. Before you mock this, it was a present from my wife for our marriage. So either she loves me greatly or she already saw it was a doomed endeavor and she wanted to get rid of me as soon as possible. No, I like this a lot. I really enjoy this book. And it's a real treasure to have because I'm sure it's hard to procure these days. In fact, I'm going to check that. Oofed. Yes. Okay. I'm not buying a second copy. Right, let's move on to a Humument. Right, this one is maybe, it's weighty. It's stubby, but it's weighty. Hang on, I'm going to weigh this thing for you. 699 grams. It's weightier than it looks. What is a Humument? Well, the short answer is I have no idea, but it's the title of the book. This is blackout poetry. You know, about 6 or 7 years ago, I became obsessed with the idea of blackout poetry. If you're not familiar, it's when you have a page of text and then you color in. Can you see that? Not really. I'll take pictures. You color in and you cancel out words. And you, by this act of kind of excision and elision, the words that you're left with form a poem. What Tom Phillips did was he took this novel, A Human Monument, and he turned every single page into blackout poetry, which is an interesting exercise in madness, but creates a pretty little coffee table book. I have read this once. It's only about 350 pages long. What you'll find with a lot of these books is their execution. What they're trying to do is sometimes more interesting than the book itself. A lot of this kind of experimental literature, it's much more about the adventure in doing it, more so than the final product itself. This next one is the Raw Shark Texts by Stephen Hall. Now, I actually made a little short on this. Maybe I'll link it in my first kind of couple of months on BookTube when I was still trying to find my feet. It's not like I'm still not trying to find my feet, huh? It's the most normal looking of the books. It's about a man who wakes up with amnesia, and I bet you've never heard that plot before. Okay, it's about a man who wakes up with amnesia, can't remember a thing about his own life, but as he begins to put the pieces together, he realizes that he's being hunted. Again, quite a boilerplate plot at this point, but what kind of separates the Raw Shark texts from something like Memento or any other sort of amnesia-based story is what's hunting him. I'm going to include a slight spoiler warning here because it is worth reading this book, and by telling you what's hunting him, it is a spoiler for the first kind of 100 pages or so, so I'll add the timestamps here. This man is being hunted by a semiotic shark. A semiotic shark. The idea is that the antagonist of this book is created by the meaning that we create ourselves when we communicate ideas to each other. So let's say to you, I want some pancakes. The idea of wanting pancakes in some weird way sort of abstractly enters this other dimension. And all of these meanings together sort of create this monster, which is a shark. And the shark is swimming through the pools of meaning, trying to hunt down our boy here. It's mad. And I know by explaining this plot to you, half of you have gone, oh, that sounds kind of cool, and half of you have already turned this video off. So if you're still around, thank you. And just like House of Leaves, the Raw Shark Texts definitely does a lot of stuff with playing with the page. So for example, look, I don't want to, right, again, maybe minor spoilers here. Can you see the wee shark swimming on the page? But it makes for a very interesting novel, and if you're into something like House of Leaves or S, this might be up your alley. It's worth a shot, at least. What time is it? It must be past 1 a.m. now. Me, you, in the dark, and some esoteric mental books. Right, let's go for the one that I gave my mum, that she's not read. It's the Other Visual Editions book. This is called Where You Are, a book of maps that will leave you completely lost, because this is a book of short stories, but the short stories are maps. I don't know about you. Since I was a kid, I have loved maps. Maybe that's why I like to travel as well. But when I was a kid, and maybe this is demonstrating my age, but hey, I've already told you, Google Earth was just released when I was sort of in the top end of primary school, I believe. And I used to spend so much time like just zooming into places on Google Earth and just exploring all these countries and things like that, just by the satellite data. And my parents have an atlas, which they still have in that room, and I used to just open it up and just pretend like I was traveling from place to place. I'm obsessed with maps. I really enjoy the idea of map as exploration, but there's also something to be said for map as story. I'm going to be careful because this is not in print anymore, and I don't want to damage them and pay my mum all that money.
Hello, it's me the next day. I did a terrible job kind of telling you about all these different map short stories, so I just want to go through them right now and show you how varied the content and the authors and that one almost fell off the table, and the perspectives are in where you are, because there's so much variety here. And all of them are so clever in what they do. Let me show you a couple. So I kind of made a mistake last night. I did call it a book of short stories. It's more like essays and autobiographical details sometimes. It's case by case. But you can see for this one, right, you've got the text at the top, and then this author, Joe Dunthorne, has chosen to sort of map out his literary landscape as such. This one is called The Lunar Hamsters of 8G932, and you can see here, laid out totally differently. And you actually have a bit more of a short story in here as well, with a little picture. Look at that little picture. I mean, it's worth buying this book for that picture alone, isn't it? And very quickly, this last one is called Places I've Nearly Been to But Have Not. It's by Adam Thirlwell, and you can see it's the real world geography, the real world topography, with the explanations above. Every single map is as different as they can be from one another. All of them. I'm so pleased to have access to a book like this, even if I don't technically own it. Mum, I'll buy it off you.
It's clever. It allows a bunch of writers to tell these really interesting stories. A lot of them are autobiographical in a way that they could not really have otherwise done. Like, how hard is it to write a short story as a map? How are you going to get that published? But here it's possible. And it's a shame that visual editions have gone out of print, because this is an example of a text that they excelled at, that not many other people would be willing to do. And given the fact they've now gone out of print, there's a reason. Right, 4 more. Let's do the other 2, B.S. Johnson. So B.S. Johnson, who wrote The Unfortunates, the first book in a box, he wrote a bunch of other texts that are all interesting and varied. So you have this one, which is House Mother Normal, and then I also picked up this one, which is called Christy Mallory's Own Double Entry. Let me start with Christy Mallory, because it's still in my hand. This is the weirdest villain origin story you're ever going to encounter. Because the premise of Christy Mallory's Own Double Entry, it's only 180 pages of pretty big text. Christy Mallory has decided that the world is against him, and the way that he gets his own back is through accounting. Now, not the kind of accounting where he kind of dodgily takes some money. No, what he does is he literally creates 2 tiers. It's called double entry accounting, apparently. I don't know very much about it. What he does is he writes down every time the world has given him an injustice. And on the other side of the table, he writes down a way in which he can kind of recover the debt the world owes him. That's kind of the premise. So for example, maybe he is stuck in traffic. He would write that down in the left-hand margin. And in the right-hand margin, he might write something like shoplift from the supermarket. And you can see how this thing escalates as his injustices, as perceived injustices, also escalate. It's very metafictional. All the characters are aware that they're in a story, which adds another kind of layer of comedy, but for some people it might be a bit on the nose, which is kind of fair. At one point, B.S. Johnson says, I'm not going to bother describing Christy Mallory. You've already got an image in your head. Just use that. That's the kind of stuff that B.S. Johnson loved to do. The other one, though, is House Mother Normal. And in some ways, this is my favorite B.S. Johnson book. It's also kind of the most madcap, because what you have... Oh, look, there's a ticket in here. I love finding echoes of my past self as bookmarks. That's kind of cool. Okay, so House Mother Normal. Set in an old folks' home. There's 8 old folks in the room, and the entire novel is the same scene over and over again 8 times, as all these different old folks in the home experience what's going on in the story. Now, because it's set in an old folks' home, the different people in the room are at different stages of deterioration. So some of them are pretty much mentally gone, some of them have health ailments, some of them are relatively healthy. But over the course of the novel, you are just trying to work out, what is going on here, man? I've got no idea. And for some of the people, some of the characters, you do have no idea. But what happens in the 9th and final chapter is the caretaker, the staff member, House Mother Normal, you get her perspective of the story and you begin to see things as they really are. And they're not as you might expect. Do you know, B.S. Johnson was recommended to me by one of my old university professors. And in hindsight, I think he hated me. And he probably had good reason to. I was a bit dubious as a student. But I'm indebted to him for introducing me to B.S. Johnson. He is one of my favourite writers who I don't get to talk about very much just because he's not very sci-fi and fantasy and he is so eccentric. But the stories he makes, you're not going to find very much else like that. So yeah, Brian Stanley Johnson. I've spoken about him before. I'll link that video down below. But any opportunity I get to talk about this absolute madman, I am grateful for. Right, the next one is another visual editions, actually. This is the 3rd visual editions. I'd be plugging them if they hadn't gone. This is their edition of Tristram Shandy, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman. This is probably the one people might have heard of because it's quite a famous classic text, Tristram Shandy. I believe it was written in the 1700s. It's a fake autobiography. I love this book. I never want to read it again, but I loved reading it. Tristram Shandy is just about this fictional man recounting his own life, and he keeps getting sidetracked. So he'll start to narrate his life. He begins with his conception, which is an excellent way to start anyone's autobiography, and then he immediately just spins off into talking about his uncle, or maybe some kind of legal document that needs to be discussed. The man just can't stay on track. And so we don't really get very far into Tristram Shandy's life. I don't know if that's a spoiler. We don't really get far in, because he just keeps blowing whichever way the wind goes and going off on these weird kind of side tangents and adventures. For a novel that's 300 years old, it's marvellously inventive and clever. It's now the kind of book that really only students... Oh, look, there's something else in here too. Oh, look, it's me and my wife. Ah, nice. Like all the other books I have discussed, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman, is bonkers. At one point, actually, Tristram Shandy stops writing because he sees that anthropomorphized death, like in Terry Pratchett, has come through the door to claim him, so he has to pick up all his stuff and head to France to recuperate and escape death. It's very strange, and I had no idea until I'd read Tristram Shandy that this kind of literature existed prior to like 1950. I will say that while it sounds fun, it is quite tough reading. I mean, the wordplay, the events that are going on, the politics, all of it is very old and archaic. So it is a bit of a struggle. It is a bit of a project book, something like Ulysses or Finnegan's Wake or what have you. But it is rewarding. And as I said previously, I'm glad I've read it. I have no plans to read it twice, but I'm not giving you my copy. Right, I'm going to weigh this last book because it is a beast, man. Now, I've also spoken about Kenneth Goldsmith on my channel. I've spoken about him twice. Once I spoke about him in that same tag that I was talking about earlier, and I also spoke about him on a live stream that I did with Evie and Anitha last week, and everyone in the chat rolled their eyes when I kind of gave the idea of what Kenneth Goldsmith is and what he tries to do in his poetry, because Kenneth Goldsmith kind of calls himself a poet. This book is 2 kilograms. I don't know how I'm going to take it to Japan. Let me show it to you. Kenneth Goldsmith is obsessed with found text as poetry. He is the plagiarist's poet. All of his stuff is just about collecting the data from elsewhere, putting it in a line, and calling that poetry. He is very much a man made by the internet age, and actually one of his non-fiction books is called Wasting Time on the Internet, him kind of justifying his approach to art. And I don't think Kenneth Goldsmith really is a poet. I would more call him a conceptual artist. I've already lost you, I can tell. So for example, he has this book called Fidget. I think I've already spoken about this one previously, where he records every single movement his body does throughout the day, and that is the book. He has another book called Soliloquy, where it's everything he says for a week, just in a line, and that's soliloquy. It is conceptual and experimental, and yeah, he has another book that's just the weather reports for a week. He has another book that's just the longest sports game ever recorded, transcribed, and that's his book. That's his writing. I will say that Kenneth Goldsmith has read his stuff at the White House, so like some people do enjoy it. So this book is called Capital, and all it is Goldsmith's accumulation of quotes and poems and newspaper reports and every single possible avenue you can think of that in some way describes New York City of the 20th century. Kenneth Goldsmith appears to love New York City. He just loves it, he thrives on it, and this is his love letter to New York City. Again, he hasn't written a single word here, is my understanding. He has just taken all of this information, all of this data, and compressed it and ordered it and sequenced it into a book that he then calls his own. And I think people's mileage with that will vary, which is totally okay. I'm not asking you to enjoy this book, much less read it. I haven't read this one. If we go back to the analogy of maps, Kenneth Goldsmith in the literary world is like at Tuvalu. Like he is as far from the center of the map as you can get, which is very unfair to Tuvalu because there's no reason the UK should often be the center of the map, but it so often is. But he's on the fringes. He's right up here in the corner, doing his own thing. He is the most, in my view, experimental of the experimental. You could just call him a plagiarist, and I think you'd be justified, but I also do very much enjoy having some selections of his work in my life. Now, it's 1:37 in the morning, and I am still wide awake, so I am absolutely hecked, but you now have my permission to leave. Thank you so much for watching this very self-indulgent video. I mean, they're all self-indulgent, but I feel like this one was particularly self-indulgent. The next time you see me will almost certainly be in Japan. By the time I upload this, I will be in Japan. But I'll leave that there. Thank you so much for watching. Say goodbye to the kitchen, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.